Hello, welcome back to our channel. Today we are canning elk. We love canned meat. I can most of our venison. We find that we use the canned venison a whole lot more than we even use the ground venison. So we've been canning most of our venison for a couple years now. I am doing a massive freezer clean out. Last week we made cat food with some of the old venison scraps that I had saved for the cats. This week I am trying to pressure can all of the elk, the roasts, and like the sirloin tips and that kind of stuff that we have. Everything except the back straps and the tenderloins. Those stayed in the freezer. But I have chickens coming next week and I need to make some room in my freezer. Plus the fact that we found that some of this elk tends to be just a little bit tough and it takes a while to cook it and the right techniques to cook it to make sure that it's not tough. It tastes fantastic, it's just a little tough. So we hoped that maybe by canning it we could, because you're pressure canning it, that we can make it nice and tender, and then it's a lot more convenient. We love canned meat because you don't need a refrigerator for it, you don't need a freezer for it. It's shelf stable and it's ready to go, it's cooked, and it's really, really convenient. We use pint size for us because that's just the size that for the two of us is the right amount. You can do this in quart size if you have a bigger family. You just need to pressure can it just a little bit longer. So for us today, for the pints, we'll be pressure canning this for an hour and 15 minutes. If you were gonna do pints, it's only an hour and a half. So it's only 15 more minutes. So we have lots of elk. Most of it's on the shelf underneath me here. It's been thawing in my fridge for a couple of days. Some of it's actually still frozen, so I have to let that thaw out just a little bit. So we're gonna go over the very, very basics of canning meat. I've gotten a lot of requests for some more tutorial type videos on canning. I've only just kind of hit the highlights on canning before, but I've had a lot of requests for it. So what we have here is we have our cutting board, a sharp knife, obviously our meat. We've got jars. Like I said, you can do pints or quarts, and these have all been washed. I washed all of them this morning and they're sitting here on a towel. I've got another towel here because we're outside and it's nice and cool this morning, but just in case the bugs come out, once I've got my jars filled, I'm just going to keep them covered with a towel. You're going to want rings the size of your jars. I like wide mouth for meat. I do use some regular size jars, the regular mouth, but most of the time for meat, I like wide. It's just a lot easier to fill it. If I'm doing a liquid like a tomato sauce or something, those go in a regular jar. But for meat, wide mouth is where it's at. So I've got all my rings. Rings are reusable, and I washed these this morning as well. And you're gonna want lids. And lids are not reusable unless you have a specific reusable type of lid. I have never used those before. I just find that these are too convenient, and I've had so much success with these that I haven't tried the reusable ones. And you want to make sure that you buy a reliable brand. Do not buy canning lids and bands from a dollar store. They just don't work. They'll buckle, you won't get a good seal, and they're just cheap and they don't work, and it's a waste of money and food. So we've got all of these here. We have some vinegar underneath the table here for wiping our rims. It's very, very important that no matter what you're canning, once you have all your jars filled, you're going to be cleaning off the rims to get any residue of food or grease or anything that may have spilled while you're filling it, and get that clean so that the rubber seal on your lid can seal to the top of the jar. We have our jar grabber. This is very important when your jars are extremely hot. You do not want to be picking them up with your hands or even with a pot holder. It's just too hard. So this is just a little jar grabber, and it just goes like this. And when you're putting them into the hot water also, it's nice and convenient. It just keeps your hands safe. So you definitely want one of these. You can buy these in a canning pack where you get the little magnetic stick to take your lids out of the hot water if you're putting them in hot water. If I'm doing a hot water bath, I'll warm up my lids. I don't typically warm up my lids when I'm pressure canning because the heat's going to make this nice and hot, and it'll seal just fine. So you can get the whole package of these things at any canning store with the canning jars. So we have our pressure canners back here. We'll go over those just a little bit and kind of the anatomy of the pressure canners, and then we will get started. Both of these are Presto brand, and they're just the most basic pressure canner you can find, pressure canner cooker that you can find in any big box store. I think I bought both of these at Menards or Farm and Fleet. So I've got two different sizes. I know this is the 23 quart. It will hold a double stack of pints, and then my smaller one, I don't know what size that is, but it's obviously a little bit smaller. So when it comes to pressure canning, you're going to need the pressure canner, and it's going to have a little dial on it. And we are going to bring this up to a pressure that is the right pressure for our altitude. You're gonna have to look at that in your book and find out what pressure you need for your particular altitude. We are barely above sea level, so we just go 10 or 11 pounds per pressure. With the canner, you're gonna have a little outlet right here, and that's where your weight goes on. I got hard water, so I got lime scale on everything. But your weight will go right there, and then that will keep the pressure in. But we're going to bring it up to pressure first before we do that. And I'll take you through that process. We're just going through the parts of this. So when you open up the canner, you've got a rack on the bottom, and you want to be really careful to never, ever put your jars on the bottom of the pot without a rack on the bottom. You do not want that direct heat hitting the bottom of your jars. And I have a second one right there, because I'm going to do a double stack of pints because I can get them in here because it's deep enough, and you need a rack in between the two. So I'm going to turn my lid inside out here. So when you first get your canner out, if it's brand new, your rubber ring is going to be just fine. But you want to make sure that if it's one that you've used before, that the rubber ring is all the way clean, all the way around, because you don't want any grease on it. And you want to just make sure that it's nice and soft and secure all the way around. That's probably the most important thing. If you have a rubber ring that's gotten hard and brittle, it's not going to hold pressure, and then it's going to explode. And I've had that happen just once, and let me tell you, it was a mess to clean up all of that chicken grease that went all over my kitchen and my pantry. It was 2 rooms away on the ceiling, so it was not fun to clean up. So make sure that your rubber ring is nice and rubbery and clean. This back here, something back here, I can push it up from the inside. This is what your indicator that your pot is actually coming up to pressure, and it's going to be down when you first start it, and then as it starts to build pressure, it's going to steam out of this hole right here, and this is where your weight goes on. This is why you want to leave this off until you have fully let this come to steam for a full 10 minutes. And then when it gets close to pressure, this little thing's going to pop up, and then you're going to know that you're getting close. And that's what you want to see. If this doesn't ever pop up, then you know you're not getting to pressure, and then you know you got a leak somewhere. So you're going to want to make sure that this comes up. And then once this has vented, and we're going to go over all of this when we're canning as well, but once this has vented for a full 10 minutes, then you're going to put your weight on there, and then your dial is going to start creeping up to whatever pressure that you need. And that's when you're going to have to start watching this. This is not something that you're going to want to walk away from. You are going to want to stay and watch your pressure. And even I found that when you are pressure canning and you have an even flame, sometimes the pressure just builds more. And even if you've been at a constant pressure for 10-15 minutes and you have another 30 minutes to go, you walk away for a few minutes, and all of a sudden you went from 11 pounds of pressure to you're like pushing 16-17, and your poor little weight's just rattling like crazy. So you want to just make sure that this is not something you walk away from. You need to dedicate your time to actually doing this. It's not scary, it really isn't. You just need to pay attention. All right, let's get started. I've got a trash can right here because all of these are individually packed, and it's going to be a little easier doing this today, I think, than what it normally is for me when I'm canning venison, because when I'm canning the venison, I'm doing it as I'm butchering the deer, and then I'm also cleaning off any fat, cleaning off all of the bad sections of meat, like the dirt or anything that got on there, if there's grass or anything, and setting aside the stuff that I'm saving for cats and stuff that we maybe want to grind if we want a little bit of grind. All of this is already butchered and cleaned up. So I've got a trash can here because I need to throw all of this away as I'm going. And the butcher that we had do this did a fantastic job of butchering this meat and packaging it. He came right to where we were hunting, picked up the elk, and brought it to his butcher shop, and then we picked it up there the next day. It was flash frozen, and everything was very nicely done. I'm gonna grab a paper towel. Forgot to get one of my jars ready here. So I'm gonna get just a few jars ready here. I don't know how many jars I'm going to need. There's a little bit of fat on here. My neighbor's cat's making noise in the background. I am going to trim some of this fat off, because I don't want a big chunk of fat like that in here. And then when you're canning meat, you want 1-inch chunks. So we'll cut these into 1-inch strips and then just cut them down to 1-inch chunks. And this is all going to be cooked down to like a roast beef consistency. You're going to be able to use it for just, you can warm it up and just eat it like as is. We like to caramelize an onion in some butter and then add the canned meat at the end, and just until it's warmed up, and it's really, really good that way. It's great for venison stroganoff or elk stroganoff for this. And it's really convenient. So when you're canning meat, you have to pressure can it. You cannot water bath this. It has to be brought up to a temperature high enough to seal the jars and to make sure that you're killing any bacteria that might be in here. So you have to pressure can it. And with meat, you do not need to add any water. When this cans in this jar, we're going to pack it pretty tight. And I'm trying to keep all the air out of this. But it's going to create all its own broth as it's cooking. And so you don't need to add any liquid to it. I know it sounds weird, because most of the time you want to bring up your contents to a certain height in the jar. And we're going to bring this up to 1-inch headspace. And then just leave it, and it's going to create its own broth. So I'm just going to cut all of these up. It's so nice out here right now. I'm used to doing this when it's cold deer season. I'm usually doing it in the house, so it's kind of nice to get all of this stuff out of my house. All right, so about 1-inch headspace. And that's going to be about the bottom of where the rings start on this one. So we push it all the way down. It's pretty solid meat in there. And it's going to cook down and shrink up a little bit. And like I said, it's going to create that broth, but then you're going to have a little bit of extra space in there. So we're just going to continue filling our jars here. I'm going to be canning chicken next week, and chicken is going to be the same exact process. I typically can the white meat only. I like just breaking down the chickens and making making the thighs boneless, putting those in the freezer, leaving the legs with the bones in, and freezing those separately. I'll freeze a couple individual breasts. Our meat chickens last year, they were so big that one breast was big enough for every meal that I wanted to do. So I just did one breast at a time, and I think one breast filled up a jar. And they were pretty big. I think they're a little smaller this year, but we're still gonna plan on canning all of their meat, the chickens, and then having the dark meat in the freezer, because I like having that. I might can a little bit of dark meat with it this year. I haven't decided yet. Kind of depends on how big they are. And then we're gonna make broth, some good bone broth out of all the carcasses when we're done. Yeah, some of this is still frozen. It's soft enough to cut, but it'll be thawed by the time we're getting it in the canner. Like I was saying, the chicken's the same process. You're not going to add any water to the chicken either. And I believe it's the same time. I think all meat is about the same time, 1 hour and 15 minutes for pints and 90 minutes for the quarts. And we used to do quarts when we had kids in the house, and some of these pieces I'm just gonna let them sit to the side and thaw out a little bit, because I'm not gonna put frozen meat in here, because frozen meat's gonna be a little bit harder to squish down in there. And I want to get it nice and full. These have been in the fridge for 3 days. I'm surprised that they're still frozen. That one needs a little time yet. Cats are over here. They know exactly what's going on right now. Not cat food day today, but they think so. I'm going to do a video on my elk hunt. I went last fall and I had everything, all my pictures and my whole plan for my video all set to go, and the timing just kind of got off, and then nobody really wanted to watch hunting videos during Christmas time, and then the timing was just not right. So I was gonna wait till this fall to talk about it, and when everybody's actually in the mood for hunting. Oh, some of these are really, really frozen. I'm gonna let these sit here while I'm doing the other ones. See if I can get some smaller ones that are actually thawed out. I think I can get, between my two canners, I think I can get 8 of the wide mouth pints in the bottom layer. So I can get 24 jars between the two canners. And I think that should be enough. And if it's not, then we'll just have some elk for supper tonight with the one that I have thawed out. A little bit of extra thick fat on here that I don't want in there. And you can have fat in there. It just looks, it looks terrible in the jar. And canned meat looks horrible anyway. Smells great when you're cooking it. Tastes great when you're eating it, but when it's sitting on a shelf, it does look terrible. So just beware it. That's probably normal if you don't like the looks of it. It's so important to have a really good knife when you're doing this too. It makes it so much easier. Nice and sharp. But my elk hunt was a lot of fun. It was at a ranch out in Colorado, and the whole place was off-grid. So I've got a whole interview with the caretaker there. He took us around and showed us how they work this whole place off-grid. And we didn't know it was off-grid when we booked the hunt, but it made sense because it was so far out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, Colorado, that it made sense that they were off-grid. And they had quite a system. So stay tuned for that video coming up sometime this fall. We're just going to continue cutting all these up, filling these jars up to 1 inch. And I'll fast forward you guys so you don't have to sit here and watch me do all of these jars. And I will bring you back once we have these filled, and when it's time to clean the rims, then we'll get started again. Well, all my jars are full, and I still have 2 big roasts and 2 packages of steaks plus another partial one here. So obviously I have to wash some more jars, but we're going to do this batch first because this is all that I can get into these 2 pressure canners. And then while they're up to pressure, since I need to be sitting out here anyway, I'll finish filling up my jars for the next batch. But for now, I am going to cover these up because I need to run inside and wash my hands before we take care of these jars, and put these in the fridge because it'll be a little bit before we get to them because I need to wash my jars and such. So we'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, so now that our jars are full, bring it a little closer here. Secret to canning success is cleanliness. Being clean. If you're clean and you follow the rules, you're not going to hurt yourself or your family. That seems to be the biggest complaint or the biggest fear when I talk to people about canning, is that they're afraid they're going to poison their family. If you follow the rules, you're not going to poison your family. It's going to be just fine. It's canning can be very forgiving, and it's not as scary as it seems. So we need to clean our rims. I just use a paper towel and some vinegar. Oops. There. And you're just going to lift up the jar and just wipe the rim. I use vinegar because it's going to break down like the greases, anything that sometimes water alone just doesn't take the grease off. And you just want to rub it all the way around the top of your rim and just make sure that it's clean, and then set that one aside. Do not skip this step. No matter how clean they look, there is always something on there. And you're going to continue to move your paper towel around. Don't use the same spot over and over again. You can use a rag if you want. I prefer a paper towel because I can just throw it away then. Now in my pressure canners there, I've got about 8 cups of water in each one. You're not going to cover these like you would in a hot water bath. You want the water up to about here. And it's steam canning is what it is. You do not need to cover them. So I have about 8 cups of water in each one. And I'm going to put probably maybe a quarter to a half a cup of vinegar in as well. And that's because I have really hard water. I have well water. And if I don't put vinegar in my canning water, whether I'm doing a hot water bath or a pressure canning, it's going to make my jars really cloudy looking because there's just a lot of lime scale on them. And that keeps the lime scale from building up on them, and your jars will be nice and clean. My hands are so cold right now because this meat is so cold. Going all the way around. This is easier with meat because there's no liquid in here sloshing around. Tomatoes are particularly messy. And if I have a lot of liquid, then I don't pick up my jar. I just hang on to it and then rub my paper towel around. And clean all our lids. And like I said, this is because any liquid or fat or a piece of food that gets stuck under there is going to prevent the rubber seal on your lid from sealing. Which isn't the end of the world because you'll just eat that one first and you'll store it in the fridge. But you do not want a whole batch of uncanned meat because then you got to go over and do it all again. One thing I did want to mention is that some of this meat has some silver skin on it, and you don't really see that in store-bought meat. It's been so long since I bought store-bought meat, but I don't remember ever seeing that on store-bought meat. But when you're doing your own butchering and you get that silver skin on your venison or any wild game, we tend to cut that off when we're cooking the meat, but when we pressure can it, that's just going to dissolve away and you're not even going to see it. So this is another benefit to canning the meat. You can use all of this without having to clean all that silver skin off, and you're never going to taste it. So that's a nice benefit of this. So I have brand new lids. Like I said, do not reuse your lids. Use a good quality one. And they come 12 in a box, so I stock up whenever I'm in a store when I find them. So there's going to be a little rubber seal on the outside of it, and you're going to set these on your jars. If I'm water bath canning, I'll warm these up in a pot of boiling water first, just to give them a little head start on softening that rubber. And remember, you cannot can in like store-bought glass jars, like mayonnaise jars. You can't reuse those type of jars. Unless it says a particular canning company on it, like Ball or Kerr or something like that, you can't reuse a jar that just came with something else in it in the store or from the store. So our lids are all on. We take our rings and just hand tight. Then we're going to take these and set them inside our canner, making sure that you have that the rack on the bottom. It's like this. Okay, so that's 8, and that fills up my bottom. So I'm going to put my other tray on top there. So you have to have something separating them. You can't just stack the jars on top of the other jars. So while I'm filling up the other jars to finish filling this one up, we are going to take our lid. Remember, we already made sure that our rubber seal was good. We have enough water at the bottom. It's about this full right here. And I have 2 full rows with a metal plate in between the layers. And this lid is only going to go on one way. You want to just make sure that your gauge is pointing towards you so that you can actually see it. It's going to slide on and then twist. And I like to fill my canner where I'm going to be cooking it, because once you get this full of jars, it's heavy. So just make sure that you have it where you're going to have it. So I'm going to leave that right there. So we are sealed. I'm going to start our heat. We're going to heat this until the steam starts coming out of this little hole right here, and it's going to come out in a solid stream. And what we want is to let that vent for 10 full minutes, and then once that's doing that, we'll start our timer, and then after the 10 minutes we'll be able to put our lid on there. Okay, so we are steaming now. You can see it coming out of that little hole there. It's a little harder to see it outside here because we're a little bit of a breeze, but we're going to set a timer for 10 minutes and let that vent. And you can see that our little vent thing in the back is already popped up, which means that we're making pressure. So in 10 minutes, we're going to put a weight on this, and then we'll bring this up to 11 pounds of pressure and let this go for an hour and 15 minutes. And while I'm sitting here watching this, I'm going to be filling up my other jars for my second batch. I've got 2 jars in this one right here. My original thought was to just have both canners going and get it all done at once, but I'm going to end up doing a second batch anyway because I don't have enough room in here for all the jars that I need to fill yet, because I have a lot more meat than what I thought. It's going to be a lot easier for me to do 2 big batches than a couple partial batches, because you want to have you don't want to just do 1 or 2 jars while you're pressure canning. You want to close to full as possible. So I'm going to just do 2 of these. We've been steaming for 10 minutes now, so we're going to put our weight on, and you can see that we already have some pressure. We are at about 4 pounds of pressure. So we're putting on the weight. It's a little hot there, be careful. And now it just got a whole lot quieter. So we're going to go up pretty quickly from here because I got a pretty big flame going. So this is when you want to start paying attention. And we want it at 10 pounds of pressure for an hour and 15 minutes. I tend to go at about 11 pounds of pressure just to make sure that I stay above that 10 pounds. Because if you don't have the 10 pounds of pressure and you drop down to, say, 8 for a couple minutes, and then you bring it back up again, you need to start that hour and 15 minutes over again once you bring it back up to 10 pounds of pressure. And I don't have time for that. So I'm actually going to slow this down right now because it's going up so fast. So a couple of tips for canning while this is coming up to pressure. I'm going to just stay out here and keep an eye on it. Is you don't have to do this with just wild game not just venison or elk. You can do this with any store-bought meat. You can do it with beef or pork, chicken, turkey, any meat that you want. You can can it. And if you find a good sale on beef roast and you want to have them all cooked, ready to go, shelf stable, if you want to take them for camping or something like that, it's so convenient, and it's just so easy that you can do this with really any meat. And a couple things that I didn't mention: when you're cleaning your lids, actually when you're cleaning your jars in the first place, you want to make sure that all of your jars are clean without cracks. And that final clean when you're doing it with the vinegar is also a good way to check to make sure that you don't have any nicks or cracks in the tops of your jars, because that also will prevent you from sealing any of your jars, or they'll just plain break. And when you have jars break in the canner, it's a mess, and it's a waste of food, and it makes you feel bad, but you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So we are at 10 pounds of pressure right now. I'm going to set a timer for 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I will see you then. So as I'm sitting here, it was starting to creep up again a little bit, and it was getting close to 15. And that little weight starts bouncing around and getting really loud, and you'll know when your pressure is getting up there a little bit too high. And I just turned the flame down a little bit, and it settled down a little bit. So it should slowly go back down a little bit. Okay, our 1 hour and 15 minutes is up, so we are going to shut this off. And I'm still well above 10 pounds of pressure. I've been running about 13 pounds because I can't get this flame any smaller on here. So now that our pressure canner is done, there's still a lot of pressure in here. We're going to let this pressure just come down naturally. Now, in this age of Instant Pots, where everybody is used to being able to just take their vent and do a fast release, don't do that on a pressure canner, especially when you're canning. If you pull this off right now, you're going to get a lot of pressure coming out of here. There's a lot of pressure built up in here, and you're going to risk breaking your jars, but you're also going to end up siphoning a lot of your food, and especially the broth that was created in these jars. It's all going to siphon out, and you're going to get a lot of bad siphoning by just drastically reducing your pressure like that. It's not good for your jars. It's not good for the food that's in them. And then the more that siphons out of those jars, it's going to be touching that rubber seal on the way out, and then you're not going to get a good seal. None of your jars are going to seal very well. And it's also going to cause some wrinkling in the lids because of the change in pressure. Let it come down naturally, and then when this says 0 and this little pressure thing on this little button on the back side, when that falls down, then it is safe to take this weight off and to open it and to remove your jars. Do not do this like an Instant Pot and do a fast release on your pressure. So this is probably going to take 20-30 minutes for it to go down. So I'm just going to let this just sit. The fire's off, and I've got my other jars ready to go in. And I will probably change the water. I typically do when I'm doing meat. I'll change the water in between batches, just because of the little bit of that siphoning. It keeps my jars cleaner, so I'm going to do that. And I'll see you back here in about a half hour. So you can see we're at 0 pounds of pressure. I can still hear that there's a little bit of pressure coming out from underneath the weight right there. And our little button is still up. And that actually is what locks your lid. You're not going to be able to get your lid open until that falls down. So you can't accidentally open it anyway. But there's still a little bit in there yet. We're going to give it a few minutes. It's actually only been about 15 minutes. Okay, so we've been at 0 for quite a while now. So we're going to take our weight off. There's going to be a little release of pressure that's in there yet. And then this little back button is going to fall down once that pressure releases out. And it smells like heat. Don't lose your weight. You can't use your pressure cooker without it. Pressure cooker, pressure canner. This does both. So now it's down. So now it is safe to open, but don't ever put your face right over top of it when you're opening it, because there's going to be a lot of steam in here. You'll be able to twist it and then lift it away from you. So this is where your jar grabbers are going to come into play. Sneak down in there, and it's still boiling. but perfectly cooked. And it doesn't look like any of it siphoned out, which is good. I might, a little bit might, and you're gonna wash your jars before you put them away. But all of that broth, remember we did these with no water, and so all of this water broth in here is all from the meat itself. So we're gonna set these on our table here. We're just gonna set them on a towel. You're gonna wanna set them somewhere where you're not gonna disturb them for at least 18 to 24 hours. Look at all that beautifully cooked meat. Ready to eat. Just heat and serve. Now as these cool off, the lids are going to pull in, and once the little bump that's on here, once that is depressed, then these are sealed. And then you can remove your rings. You should always store your jars without your rings in them. Leave them on for about 24 hours, but store your jars without the rings. Otherwise they start getting hard to pull off, and then if something does happen to your seal, you won't hide it with the fact that your ring is still on. You'll know it because the lid will be off. So it's a safety feature also. Then we're going to wash these off and mark them so we know the difference between the elk and the venison. And Dan wants me to do some beef this way for him also. And I'll definitely have to mark that because I don't want to eat that. And that's hot. I got to figure out how to get in there and get that out of there. And all that talk about hard water and putting putting vinegar in my water, I forgot to do it. So I'm going to show you the difference between using vinegar and not using vinegar in your canning, because I can already see that these jars are going to be full of lime scale. So you can already hear them. There's two of them. That's the sound of success right there as they cool. Some of them are faster than others. It could be a few hours before some of them actually get that seal. But you'll start hearing ping, 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 ping now for a while. So I'm going to dump my water in my canner. I'm going to put some fresh water in, and then I am going to do the next batch. I'm going to do it with vinegar so you can see the difference. Because you can see that one right there, all of that lime scale on there. I'm going to have to try and wipe that off because it's going to look terrible. And the more you let that build up, the harder it is to get off. So I just forgot. I love that sound. Like I said, the sound of success. That means it's sealed, and that's good. Okay, so these have been out for a few hours, and technically you don't touch them for 24 hours. I'm probably going to end up moving them inside just because we've got bears here, and it smells like meat out here. So I'm going to just very carefully put them on my cutting board and carry them inside without jostling them around too much. But I did want to show you real quick what they look like. You can see the broth level is about up to there, and all of that came out of the meat itself. We didn't put any water in here. But I also wanted to show you what my jars look like if I forget to put the vinegar in the water. I got all of this calcium or lime buildup on my jars, and this one's perfectly clean. For a second batch, I didn't forget to put the vinegar in. And as the meat cools, you will get a fat layer on the top if there was any fat in your meat. So depending on the consistency of your meat and how fatty it is, it's going to depend on how much fat you have on the top. And you can always scrape that off the top. This one's got a little more. It's just a little fat ring on the top. You can pull it out. You can use it for cooking when you're warming up your meat. It's not going to hurt it at all. It just tends to float to the top. So that is how you can meat, and it's not as scary as it sounds. It's actually quite easy. It's shelf stable. You don't need a refrigerator or a freezer for it. You can take it camping. You can just take it for lunch. You can do whatever you want with it. It doesn't need a fridge, and that's what we really like about it. So thanks for joining us this week, and we will see you next time.